before in maybe 2013, you can hear a lot of this kind of people dead because of they use them for, they said, their blood. When you like kill a Zuhri person, the blood is like go to, it's like bush. What's that called? When go out.
Yes, the blood.
Yeah,
comes
go
of
out.
the
Yeah,
neck.
that point in the blood in the ground.
Yeah.
So if you do a hole, if you, what's that called in?
You dig a hole.
You dig a hole, you find gold. So they kill them because of the blood. So Zuhri person, you can see it in his eye and his hand, his hair. But there's some Zuhri person you can't see it. He's a Zuhri person, but you're not gonna see him. So maybe they use a jinn or something to pick that is Zuhri person, and they kill them. They salam.
Okay.
They use their blood.
A community's sense of itself is grounded in its history, both real and mythic. Culture and religion, even a person's own individuality, is made up of an understanding of historical placement. Time is a continuum of that caused this, and this caused that, leading up to our understanding of now. Our perception of history, the records and stories about people over time, are a narrative about cause and effect. Of course, the historian's task is to sort out what is and what is not valid historical information, but the historical is not the layperson, and their understandings, which are in turn shaped by their own historical placement, generally don't filter into the general public for decades, if at all. While cultural ideas can be traced back to artists, philosophers, political leaders, most people are unaware of their origins of their abstract understandings of daily life. If you ask a person why they do or believe something, they can give you an explanation, but that explanation itself is development that took thousands of years to make. Everyone has a lay understanding of most things, and this includes our own cultures and our own historical placement. Normally, this isn't a problem. I don't know how my computer works. I know that it uses electricity, and I know that I can press the buttons to make it do things, but I don't know how electricity works off the top of my head, and I don't need to. It's not a problem for me. Same thing with my smartphone. Same thing for practically anything else that I use in my day-to-day life that isn't applicable to my own job. You know, the lay knowledge that's been mediated over time by the community are norms and values which have grown and expanded in order to make a community work in various ways. History is a grounding point. It's a center of gravity. It's an explanation for a way of life. In general, culture is concerned only with what is presented daily before people. The music, art, education, knowledge, ideas about truth, statements about life, and general understandings are all explained in part with the general cultural beliefs that have been built up over time within the local historical context. If we seek to understand more about ourselves as humans, both collectively and individually, we have to first examine the historical contexts that give rise to these ideas. The truth of something is relative to a person's cultural understanding, and that understanding is in turn mediated by the culture itself. Morocco is an interesting place, and it's been occupied since the Paleolithic. You know, it's had people fighting over it since the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians, the Romans, the Vandals, Byzantines, Visigoths, and of course the Arabic culture, which brought Islam into the region. Morocco is the most northwestern country on the continent of Africa, and it borders both the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. It claims the southern Strait of Gibraltar, and this alone makes it one of the most strategic places in the world for seafaring cultures, both ancient and modern. Human sacrifice in this context is a syncretic phenomenon. And so we're going to have to look at the various building blocks that go into it in a place like this. because in order to fully explore and understand the occurrence, we're going to have to go into a whole lot of different things. Now, myths and legends about buried treasure have circulated since the dawn of time. Today you can flip through TV channels or go through online categories and you can find shows, books, articles, all of them dedicated to lost treasure and civilizations. Treasure is a staple in children's stories, from Peter Pan to The Hobbit to Treasure Island. The Ark of the Covenant is what inspired the Indiana Jones franchise, and myths about Atlantis have caused numerous books, movies, shows to be made with the goal of discovering something from a time long past. There's an air of mystery and wonder with buried treasure. It could be gold, it could be art, it could be writing, anything secret which is hidden away from the rest of the world for one reason or another. Not only is it the promise of wealth, but it's a physical representation of an age-long past. Buried treasure, whatever its form, is this physical thing that connects the past to the present. In recent years, there have been political movements to return archaeological discoveries to their home cultures. Art, jewelry, religious, and cultural relics are all being requested by their original cultures, because these discoveries are a validation of a way of life, of a previous way of life. And these things are a part of that culture's formative identity. Buried treasure, whether real, in the case of archaeological discoveries, or myth, like Atlantis, are ways to help us determine who we are in relation to the world around us. References to buried treasure appear in the Abrahamic religious traditions as well, and the cultures springing forth from the Abrahamic traditions, both Western and Arabic, are full of various stories with treasure-centered motifs. Of course, now we talk about the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail, the lost treasure of King Solomon, but there's also alchemy and the philosopher's stone. In the book of Matthew, Jesus used the allegory of hidden treasure in a parable that he told to his disciples. Secret treasure is a universal motif used throughout time, and it's still a common point of interest in popular culture at large today. I was sitting with one of my friends in one of the main thoroughfares of the town that I was living in at the time. He told me that Morocco is a land full of treasures. Everybody knows this. People took their money and their jewels, and they put them in the ground to protect them. He said the graveyards are full of them, especially the Jewish graveyards, but nobody goes and touches those. But there are a lot of treasures outside of the graveyards as well. He told me that Ibn Khaldun wrote about them, and that if I wanted to know more about the treasures in Morocco, I needed to read a book called the Muqaddimah, which was written by Ibn Khaldun. Now, Ibn Khaldun was a famous North African scholar. His works on history, philosophy, sociology, and economics are among the greatest produced during the Middle Ages. His ideas and theories were the forerunners to much of modern social scientific thought, both in the Islamic and the Western world. He was among the first to popularize observations of tribalism and ethnocentrism, and he wrote about group feelings and social cohesion. He was the forerunner to modern economic thought, being the first scholar to write about supply-side economics. He's also credited by various people as being a pioneer of anthropological studies, because he lived with and studied the nomadic tribes in North Africa at large. The book, the Muqaddimah, was written in 1377, and it's one of the first books of its kind. It covers sociological, demographical, historical, and theological and philosophical topics. And he plays all of these things in with economics, political theory, and ecology. While he's certainly a product of his time and place, he's a polymath rivaled by few, and I can't do his work or the man himself justice. He's also not going to be a focus. Rather, I introduce him and the Muqaddimah because it covers the history of the Bedouin and the Berber dynasties, and among the cultural practices that he encountered and documented was treasure hunting. Quote, "They believe that all the property of the nations of the past was stored underground and sealed by magic talismans. These seals, they believe, can be broken only by those who may chance upon the necessary knowledge and can offer the proper incense, prayers, and sacrifices to break them. The inhabitants of the cities of Africa believe that European Christians who lived in Africa before Islam buried their property and entrusted its hiding place to written lists, until such a time as they might be able to find a way to dig it up again. The inhabitants of the cities in the east hold similar beliefs with regard to the nations of the Copts, the Romans, the Byzantines, and the Persians. They circulate stories to this effect that sound like idle talk. Thus, a treasure hunter comes to dig where the money was buried, but he does not know the talisman or the story connected with it. As a result, he finds the place empty or inhabited by worms, or he sees the money and jewels lying there, but guards, and in this case guards is a reference to the jinn, stand over them with drawn swords, or the earth shakes, so that he believes he will be swallowed up, and other similar nonsense. He goes on to detail the various scams that he observed people using. People would demonstrate secret knowledge. They'd manufacture papers and maps, tearing their edges, writing in Arabic and other scripts, claiming that they were secret languages. Some treasure hunters would demonstrate faux magical practices and give their victims the idea that they were sorcerers, so that they could then tell their victims, which were normally wealthy people, that they had the ability to interpret the papers as maps in order to find the treasure. They would then go on to secure the funding, promising the rich people that they would give them a portion of the money found, and after they secured the funding, they would disappear. Other people genuinely believed the rumors, and as such they would attempt to make a living by searching for treasure. These attempts were, of course, fruitless. But the word traveled all the way across North Africa to Cairo, and Egyptians would consult with Moroccan treasure hunters about different techniques for treasure hunting. Quote, "Among the people of the various dynasties and the inhabitants of cities such as Cairo, where there is much luxury and living conditions are favorable, many are engrossed in the search for treasure. They question travelers about extraordinary tales of hidden treasure with the same eagerness they show for the practice of alchemy. Thus we hear that the inhabitants of Cairo consult with the Maghrebi students, in hopes that, with their help, they may perhaps hit on some buried treasure. They further investigate the possibility of making water disappear in the soil, because they believe that the majority of all buried treasure is to be found in the canals of the Nile, and that the Nile largely covers the buried and hoarded treasures in those regions. Persons who possess the aforementioned forged records fool themselves with the excuse that the reason they cannot reach the treasure is because the Nile flows there. In this way they cover up their lies. The things that have been said about treasure hunting have no scientific basis, nor are they based upon factual information. The things said about treasure hunting have no scientific basis, nor are they based upon factual information. It should be realized that although treasures are sometimes found, this happens rarely and by chance, not by systematic search." He observes that while treasures may occasionally be found in Egypt, India, and China, they are remnants of civilizations past. That the burial practices among these cultures differ, with some cultures burying their dead with gold, silver, and precious stones. He also makes the observation that money changes hands over time, and if it is not to be found in Morocco at the time of his writing, it's because it has already made its way to wealthier empires. The young man who told me to look into the Muqaddimah knew that treasure was mentioned, but nothing beyond that. He knew that Ibn Khaldun wrote about the treasure, and that alone was enough to grant validity to the myth. If the myth was well established by the year 1377, then it's been a part of Moroccan history for as long as anyone can remember. That being said, Ibn Khaldun did not record any trace of human sacrifice in connection to the ritual. He did not shy away from it when discussing such practices with other cultures, referencing what he called, quote, inhuman and animalistic practices in sub-Saharan Africa. And he even went on to call Moroccans that practice treasure hunting weak-minded and fools. So, at the time of his writing, I think it's safe to say that human sacrifice was not practiced or related to the art and the culture surrounding treasure hunting yet. Now, this blatant critique and dismissal of Moroccan folklore does not come up in discussions about Ibn Khaldun. Rather, it seems that the popular knowledge of the Muqaddimah is limited only to the various good things that he wrote about Morocco, or that he acknowledged the treasures in the work itself. The acknowledgement of the existence of buried treasure is universal in the popular culture, with different ideas about what it is, where it is hidden, and why it hasn't been found. I was sitting in this room in a downtown building. I think we were on the 4th floor. And there was a woman sitting across from me. And she told me a story. My family found treasure once. We were digging in our garden to plant vegetables, and we found a vase full of treasure. My dad dug around the vase until it was halfway out of the ground, and he called his brother and all of us. So we came to look at it. They had an argument about what to do with it, and my uncle wanted to call a faqih. And in Moroccan Arabic, a faqih roughly translates to priest. My dad didn't want to, because they would have to pay the faqih if he came. So after a while, they decided to just take the vase out of the ground. And when they did that, all of the treasure inside was turned to dirt, so that when we opened the vase, all the treasure was gone. Just dirt and mud. I asked her what happened to the treasure, and she replied that since they had not called a faqih, the guardian of the treasure, a jinn, had turned it into dirt. Her explanation echoes the experience of Ibn Khaldun. The guardian of the treasure had snatched it away, since the extraction was not done properly. Thus, the treasure was lost. This woman was well educated. She spoke 4 languages and was an RN. It never crossed her mind that the vase was filled with dirt and mud to begin with, because the explanation for such an occurrence is already anticipated by the beliefs within the culture at large. She had no doubt about the existence of buried treasure, and she knew that her family had stumbled across part of Morocco's heritage. After all, she had seen the vase. It was right there in the ground in front of her. The culture allows its participants to make anticipations and assumptions within its own boundaries. All cultures do. Because if the cultural belief system does not leave room for the speculation of failure within its own context, then people stop adhering to it. Often, people with unexplained success or wealth are said to have found treasure. One man had secured funds to rent a building for a gym and workout center, and occupied a 3-story building. There was a floor for men, for women, and a floor for boxing and MMA. As we walked past it, the men with me told me that they had known the owner for a long time, and only recently had enough money to finance such a thing. They told me that he had secured a treasure, and he used that treasure to finance his gym. I asked them how they knew that, and they said they just knew. They had never asked about how he got his wealth, because it's rude to inquire about such things, but they were certain that he had gotten the treasure. These stories are common throughout rural areas. People with unexplained wealth are believed to have discovered treasure, and rumors and legends of treasures being discovered by one means or another, only to vanish when people actually go to extract them, are common. The guardians of the treasure, the jinn, protect the treasure unless you do a particular ritual, which is dependent on the jinn's whim to expel their protection. Rumors of shovels breaking, sudden attacks by snakes, hallucinations, and other things are not uncommon. Nearly everyone I encountered in the rural parts of the country had a story, personal, from a friend or family member, of finding a treasure, only to have it snatched away from them by the jinn.
يخليتوها يسيبوها يحفظ الوليدات يحفظ البنيات من شر المخلوقات الإيمان ديال بويا حميد الله يطلق سراحهم الله يداوي جراحهم الله يبين رباحهم الله ينقش عقلهم الله يصوب سعدهم الله يجعل خيرهم أحسن من أولهم آمين ربي والملائكة علينا شاهدين وخير دعوة استر الله الحمد لله رب العالمين فاتحة الشاوي الله يحفظك الله يضمنك شتي الحلاوة الله يجعل الجراد داوة ويجعل الكريم مولانا الله يحفظ الإيمان الله يزيد في الأعمال